morning. Excuse me. So the video yesterday was really hard to hear. I don't know what's going on with my microphone. I don't know. I think I'm just going to have to be really close and talk louder. I hope that you guys heard most of it. Today we're going to read chapter 3. So let me just set the timer. Um, voice is scratchy this morning. Okay, here we go. If you failed, are you a failure? Failure isn't so bad if it doesn't attack the heart. Success is all right if it doesn't go to the head. It's good. In an interview years ago, David Brinkley asked advice columnist Ann Landers what question she most frequently receives from readers. Her answer, "What's wrong with me?" Landers' response reveals a lot about human nature. Many people wrestle with feelings of failure, the most damaging being doubtful thoughts about themselves. At the heart of those doubts and feelings is one central question: am I a failure? And that's a problem because I believe it's nearly impossible for any person to believe he is a failure and fail forward at the same time. It seems that advice columnists such as Ann Landers and humor writers recognize that keeping a good perspective of yourself is important to overcoming adversity and mistakes. The late Irma Bombeck, who wrote a widely syndicated weekly humor column until a few weeks before her death in 1996, had a firm grasp on what it meant to persevere and fail forward without taking failure too personally. Excuse me. From newspaper copy girl to Time magazine cover girl, Irma Bombeck traveled a road that was filled with adversity, starting with her career. She was drawn to journalism early in life. Her first job was as a copy girl at the Dayton Journal Herald when she was a teenager. But when she went off to college at Ohio University, a guidance counselor advised her forget about writing. She refused. Later, she transferred to the University of Dayton and in 1949 graduated with a degree in English. Soon afterward, she began working as a writer for the obituary column and the women's page. That year, adversity carried over into her personal life. When she got married, one of her deepest desires was to become a mother. But much to her dismay, her doctors told her she was incapable of having children. Did she give up and consider herself a failure? No. She and her husband explored the possibility of adoption, and then they adopted a daughter. 2 years later, a surprise Irma became pregnant, but even that brought her more difficulties. In 4 years, she experienced 4 pregnancies, but only 2 of the babies survived. In 1964, Irma was able to convince the editor of a small neighborhood newspaper, the Kettering Oakwood Times, to let her write a weekly humor column. Despite the pitiful $3 per article she was paid, she kept writing, and that opened a door for her. The next year, she was offered the opportunity to write a 3 times a week column for her old employer, the Dayton Journal Herald. By 1967, her column was syndicated and carried by more than 900 newspapers. For slightly more than 30 years, Irma wrote her humor column. During that time, she published 15 books, was recognized as one of the 25 most influential women in America, appeared frequently on the television show Good Morning America, was featured on the cover of Time magazine, received innumerable honors, such as the American Cancer Society's Medal of Honor, and was awarded 15 honorary degrees, more than her share of problems. But during that span of time, Irma Bombeck also experienced incredible troubles and trials, including breast cancer, a mastectomy, and kidney failure. And she wasn't shy about sharing her perspective on her life experiences. I speak at college commencements, and I tell everyone I'm up there and they're down there, but not because of my successes, but my failures. Then I proceed to spin all of them off: a comedy record album that sold 2 copies in Beirut, a sitcom that lasted about as long as a donut in our house, a Broadway play that never saw Broadway, book signings where I attracted 2 people, one who wanted directions to the restroom and the other who wanted to buy the desk. What you have to tell yourself is, I'm not a failure. I failed at doing something. There's a big difference. Personally and career wise, it's been a corduroy road. Um, Interesting. I've never heard it put like that. I've buried babies, lost parents, had cancer, and worried over kids. The trick is to put it all in perspective, and that's what I do for a living. That point of view kept Irma Bombeck down to earth. She liked to refer to herself as a former homeroom mother and obituary writer. It also kept her going and writing through the disappointments, the pain, the surgeries, and the daily kidney dialysis until her death at age 69. Every genius, every genius could have been a failure. Every successful person is someone who failed, yet never regarded himself as a failure. For example, Wolfgang Mozart, one of the geniuses of musical composition, was told by Emperor Ferdinand that his opera, The Marriage of Figaro, was far too noisy and contained far too many notes. Artist Vincent van Gogh, whose paintings now set records for the sums they bring at auction, sold only one painting in his lifetime. Thomas Edison, the most prolific inventor in history, was considered unteachable as a youngster. And Albert Einstein, the greatest thinker of our time, was told by a Munich schoolmaster that he would never amount to much. I think it's safe to say that all great achievers are given multiple reasons to believe they are failures. But in spite of that, they persevere. In the face of adversity, rejection, and failings, they continue believing in themselves and refuse to consider themselves failures. I love this. This is so true because sometimes we just like internalize it, and it's like what Brene Brown says, like your worth has never been in question. Like your worth is always there. Um, you have belonging, and like the actions that you do, it's kind of like when we tell our kids, like, oh, we're not supposed to say you're a good boy or you're a bad boy because that's what they're worth. And so when they make a bad choice, you're like, oh, that was a bad choice. And so it's like disconnecting those two. It's so important. We got to do it in our own heads. Okay. Failing forward is not false self. Sorry, I'm having a hard time talking today. Failing forward is not false self esteem. In the last 20 years, as educators in the United States have watched students' test scores plummet and their desire to learn decline, they have tried to find ways to reverse those trends. One popular theory states that the best way to improve children's ability is to puff up their self esteem. When educators observed that high achievers possessed competence, they theorized that if they simply built self esteem, competence would follow. But that approach has backfired on them. Researchers have found that simply building children's egos breeds many negative traits: indifference to excellence, inability to overcome adversity, and aggressiveness toward people who criticize them. Now, I place high value on praising people, especially children. In fact, I believe that people live up to your level of expectations. But I also believe that you have to base your praise on truth. You don't make up nice things to say about others. Here's the approach I use to encourage and lead others: value people, praise effort, reward performance. I use that method with everyone. I even use a form of it with myself. When I'm working, I don't give myself a reward until after the job is finished. When I approach a task or project, I give it my very best, and no matter what the results are, I have a clear conscience. I have no problem sleeping at night, and no matter where I fail or how many mistakes I make, I don't let it devalue my worth as a person. As the saying goes, God uses people who fail because there aren't any other kind around. Like many people, you may have a hard time maintaining a positive mindset and preventing yourself from feeling like a failure. But know this: it is possible to cultivate a positive attitude about yourself, no matter what circumstances you find yourself in or what kind of history you have. And this goes back to like the thought coaching that I love, with Brooke Castillo and Jody Moore. Like circumstance, you think of what the circumstance was. Um, so like one example I use is my kitchen is dirty. That's a circumstance. It has nothing to do with me. It's just my kitchen is dirty. But my thought used to be I'm an awful mom because my kitchen is dirty. And then after that, so it's CTF is feeling, and my feeling was worthlessness and defeat, and you know, and then after that, it's action. My action was usually I don't want to clean my kitchen because I feel like crap because I'm awful. And then my results were my kitchen stayed dirty. But if we change it, the circumstance is the same. My kitchen is dirty. My thought could be, I am going to or I'm going to unload and load today. Or, whatever. Like, I can have a thought about it and not make it about me. Because it's not. I mean, I can just choose my choices and my actions, and a better thought will lead to better actions. So true. I've done so much work with that. All right. Uh, 7 abilities needed to fail forward. Here are 7 abilities of achievers that enable them to fail, not take it personally, and keep moving forward. Number 1, achievers reject rejection. Author James Allen states, a man is literally what he thinks, his character being the complete sum of all his thoughts. That's why it's important to make sure your thinking is on the right track. People who don't give up keep trying because they don't. Sorry, I need to reread that. People who don't give up keep trying because they don't base their self worth on their performance. Instead, they have an internally based self image. Rather than say, I am a failure, they say, I missed that one, or I made a mistake. Psychologist Martin E. Seligman believes we have 2 choices when we fail. We can internalize or externalize our failure. People who blame themselves when they fail think they are worthless, talentless, unlovable, says Seligman. People who blame external events do not lose self esteem when bad events strike. To keep the right perspective, take responsibility for your actions, but don't take failure personally. Number 2, achievers see failure as temporary. People who personalize failure see a problem as a hole they're permanently stuck in, but achievers see any predicament as temporary. For example, take the case of United States President Harry S. Truman. In 1922, he was 38 years old, in debt, and out of work. In 1945, he was the most powerful leader of the free world, occupying the highest office in the land. If he had seen failure as permanent, he would have remained stuck and never would have kept trying and believing in his potential. And I feel like that totally relates to like scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset. I've totally struggled with that too. Like, I mean, I've had a lot of debt in my life, still have some debt, but if I'm like, oh, I'll never get out of debt, I'll never get out of debt, I'm just a person who has debt and I just stay there, then I'm never going to get out of debt. But if I have abundance, I'm like, well, like I have some debt, I'm going to make some different choices. I'm going to trust in Holy Father and watch for miracles for Him to help me. Like, it's going to happen. And I'm seeing that right now. It's really cool. Okay. Number 3, achievers see failures as isolated incidents. Author Leo Buscaglia once, I don't know if I said that, Buscaglia, I don't know, Buscaglia, once talked about his admiration for cooking expert Julia Child. I just love her attitude. She says, tonight we're going to make a souffle. And she beats this and whats that, and she drops things on the floor and does all these wonderful human things. Then she takes the souffle and throws it in the oven and talks to you for a while. Finally, she says, now it's ready. But when she opens the oven, the souffle just falls flat as a pancake. But does she panic or burst into tears? No. She smiles and says, well, you can't win 'em all. Bon appetit. When achievers fail, they see it as a momentary event, not a lifelong epidemic. It's not personal. If you want to succeed, don't let any single incident color your view of yourself. Number 4, achievers keep expectations realistic. The greater the feat you desire to achieve, the greater the mental preparation required for overcoming obstacles and persevering over the long haul. If you want to take a stroll in your neighborhood, you can reasonably expect to have few, if any, problems. But that's not the case if you intend to climb Mount Everest. It takes time, effort, and the ability to overcome setbacks. You have to approach each day with reasonable expectations and not get your feelings hurt when everything doesn't turn out perfectly. Something that happened on baseball's opening day in 1954 illustrates that point well. The Milwaukee Braves and the Cincinnati Reds played each other, and a rookie for each team made his major league debut during that game. The rookie who played for the Reds hit four doubles and helped his team win with a score of 9-8. The rookie for the Braves went over 5. The Reds player was Jim Greengrass, a name you probably haven't heard. The other guy who didn't get a hit might be more familiar to you. His name was Hank Aaron, the player who became the best home run hitter in the history of baseball. If Aaron's expectations for that first game had been unrealistic, who knows? He might have given up baseball. Surely he wasn't happy about his performance that day, but he didn't think of himself as a failure. He had worked too hard for too long. He wasn't about to give up easily. Number 5, achievers focus on strengths. Another way achievers keep themselves from personalizing failure is by focusing on their strengths. Bob Butera, former president of the New Jersey Devils hockey team, was asked what makes a winner. He answered, "What distinguishes winners from losers is that winners concentrate at all times on what they can do, not on what they can't do. If a guy is a great shooter but not a great skater, we tell him to think only about the shot, the shot, the shot, never about the other guy outskating him. The idea is to remember your successes." Love that. My friend Christy Jacks told me once when I was struggling, she's like, every single day, no matter what happened that day, at the end of the day, write down 3 wins that you had that day. And that's so impactful to do. Okay, if a weakness is a matter of character, it needs much attention. Focus on it until you shore it up. Otherwise, the best bet for failing forward is developing and maximizing your strengths. Number 6, achievers vary approaches to achievement. In The Psychology of Achievement, Brian Tracy writes about 4 millionaires who made their fortunes by age 35. They were involved in an average of 17 businesses before finding the one that took them to the top. They kept trying and changing until they found something that worked for them. Achievers are willing to vary their approaches to problems. That's important. That's important in every walk of life, not just business. For example, if you're a fan of track and field events, you have undoubtedly enjoyed watching athletes compete in the high jump. I'm always amazed by the heights achieved by the men and women in that event. What's really interesting is that in the 1960s, the sport went through a major change in technique that allowed athletes to break the old records and push them up to new levels. The person responsible for that change was Dick Fosbury, where previous athletes used the straddle method to high jump, in which they went over the bar while facing it with one arm and one leg heading. Fosbury developed a technique where he went over head first with his back to the bar. It was dubbed the Fosbury flop. Developing a new high jump technique was one thing. Getting it accepted by others was another matter. Fosbury remarked, "I was told over and over again that I would never be successful, that I was not going to be competitive, and the technique was simply not going to work. All I could do was shrug and say, we'll just have to see." And people did see. Fosbury won the gold medal in the Mexico City Olympics in 1968, shattering the previous Olympic record and setting a new world record in the process. Since then, nearly all world class high jumpers use this technique. To achieve his goals, Fosbury varied his approach to high jumping, and he didn't allow others' comments to make him feel like a failure. 7. Achievers bounce back. All achievers have in common the ability to bounce back after an error, mistake, or failure. Psychologist Simone Carruthers says, "Life is a series of outcomes. Sometimes the outcome is what you want. Great. Figure out what you did right. Sometimes the outcome is what you don't want. Great. Figure out what you did so you don't do it again." That's the key to bouncing back. Achievers are able to keep moving forward no matter what happens. And that's made possible because they remember that failure does not make them failures. No one should take mistakes personally. That's the way to take yourself out of failure. One who refused to be a failure. One of the best stories I've ever heard of someone who refused to take failure personally is that of Daniel Rudy Rudiger, a kid who desperately wanted to play football for Notre Dame. You may have seen the film based on his life called Rudy. It was a good movie, but his real story is even more remarkable and compelling. The first of 14 children in a poor working class family, Rudy loved sports as a kid and believed that might be his ticket out of Joliet, Illinois. In high school, he gave himself completely to football, but his heart was much greater than his physique. He was slow, and at 5 feet 6 inches tall and 190 pounds, he wasn't exactly built for the game. Rudy's dream. Oh, that's our timer. We're not quite done with chapter 3. Okay. There's only like 2 pages left. I'm just gonna finish it, and then tomorrow we'll do chapter 4. Okay, Rudy's dream. As a senior, he began dreaming about attending Notre Dame and playing football there. But Rudy faced another problem. His grades showed less promise than his physique. I finished third in my class, he is fond of saying, not from the top, but from the bottom. He was a D student. He graduated from high school with a 1.77 grade point average. For the next several years, Rudy changed his focus from one thing to another. He tried attending junior college for one semester, but flunked every class. He went to work for 2 years at the local Commonwealth Edison power plant in Joliet, what he considered to be the ultimate dead end job. And he even did a 2 year hitch in the Navy, which turned out to be a turning point for him. That's where he discovered that he wasn't dumb and that he could handle responsibility. After his military service, he returned to Joliet and again worked in the power plant. He was more determined than ever to go to Notre Dame, despite the criticism of his family, friends, and coworkers. He knew he was not a failure and he would find a way to go to South Bend, making a move. If you saw the movie, then you know that Rudy eventually made it. He quit his job, moved to South Bend, and managed to get into Holy Cross College, a community college affiliated with the university. He attended the college for 2 years and earned a 4.0 average every semester before Notre Dame accepted him. He entered his dream school at age 26, 8 years after graduating from high school. With 2 years of sports eligibility remaining, he went out for football and he made the team as a scrub, one of the warm bodies they put in practice to keep the good players sharp. But Rudy made the most of it. He worked hard, and after a year, he went from the bottom of the scrubs all the way up to the sixth string, the top of the scrubs. His last year, he worked hard again, and in the final game of his final season, Rudy lived his dream by getting to play. Rudy's last chance. In the movie, Rudy Rudiger gets in for only one play at the end of the game, and he sacks the quarterback. That's not how it really happened. In real life, I had 2 chances to get the quarterback, says Rudy. The first play, I didn't get there in time. I was too anxious and didn't execute the play. I failed. But once again, Rudy didn't let his failure make him a failure. He was determined to fail forward. I knew this was the last chance I would ever get, he explains. When they snapped the ball, I wasn't worried about failing. I'd done that already, and I knew why I had failed. That's how you eliminate that fear. You keep learning until you have the confidence to perform when you have to. When they snapped the ball for the last time, I put the moves I'd rehearsed in my mind on the guy over me, and I got the quarterback. Overjoyed, the team carried him off the field in celebration. Rudy says it's the only time that's happened to a player in the history of Notre Dame football. Today, Rudy is a motivational speaker, and believe it or not, he was the force behind the making of the movie Rudy. Of course, it wasn't easy for him. It took him 6 years to see that happen, 2 years less than it took him to get to Notre Dame. The people in Hollywood told him, "You're not Paul Hornung or Joe Montana." Rudy agreed. "There's only one of them," he explained. "There's a million of me." And that's the great thing about Rudy's story. He doesn't have the athletic ability of Michael Jordan, nor is he a genius like Mozart, Van Gogh, Edison, or Einstein. He's just a regular person like you and me. The only reason he's an achiever instead of average is that he refused to let failure get the better of him. He learned that no matter how many times you fail, it doesn't have to make you a failure. So, your third step to failing forward is remove the you from failure. If you've been thinking of yourself as a failure, you can break yourself out of that negative thinking pattern. Look at an area of your life where you have repeatedly failed and do the following. Examine your expectations for that area. Write them down. Are they realistic? Do you expect to do everything perfectly? Do you expect to succeed on the first try? How many mistakes should you expect to make before you succeed? Adjust your expectations. Find new ways to do your work. Brainstorm at least 20 new approaches and then try at least half of them. I like that. Focus on your strengths. How can you use your best skills and personal strengths to maximize your efforts? Vow to bounce back. No matter how many times you fall down, pick yourself up and keep going. Don't wait until you feel positive to move forward. Act your way into feeling good. That's the only way to start thinking more positively about yourself. And here's the recap of the 3 steps. Number 1, realize there's one major difference between average people and achieving people, which is failing. Number 2, learn a new definition of failure. And number 3, remove the you from failure. Love this chapter. So good. All right, y'all. I think as women, we tend to do this a lot where we just are we take it so personally. We think it means that we will never amount to anything or we've failed and we can't get back. But we can change that. We can change it. All right, love you guys.